Hey guys, welcome to Cornerstone Live. We're so glad that you joined us for our online service. Bob Combs is going to be preaching a message this week, Before You Go. We know that so many people have been hurt by the church, that leave the church for different reasons, and we hope that you're richly blessed by this week's message. As you move forward throughout your week, we hope that you're encouraged and lifted up. See you soon.
Are you thinking about leaving Christianity? Or perhaps you already have. Now, those of you who have been following us online for any length of time, you might wonder why I would be even asking a question like that. Well, I've noticed that more and more young adults who have grown up in the church are doing just that. They're leaving. I think it's important for us to understand why that is and have an open and honest discussion about that. It's not my opinion that matters. It's theirs that does. You know, there's tons of videos on YouTube about this very topic. And I happened to watch one from a young lady, a young woman who was explaining why she was leaving Christianity. She had over 40,000 views and 1,600 comments underneath her video. And those comments were mostly from those who agreed with her, who also either were thinking about leaving Christianity or have already left Christianity. And in her notes below, she quotes from a book written by Timothy Leary called How to Operate Your Brain. And this is what the quote says. To think for yourself, you must question authority and learn how to put yourself in a state of vulnerable open-mindedness, chaotic, confused vulnerability to inform yourself. I'm not sure that I agree with the chaotic and the confusion, but I do think it's okay to question things. You know, though, this is an interesting comment, an interesting quote from a man who spent the entire 60s extolling the virtue of using LSD to tune in, turn on, and to drop out. You know, a lot of the negativity about church and about religion centers on people's perception of how Christians judge them, how they lack freedom, how fear seems to be a primary driver and motivator of preachers. Fear of hell, fear of God. Maybe this describes where you've been at some point in your life, or where you are right now. I think many of us have had a prodigal son period in our lives. I know that I have. I pulled just one of the quotes from these 1,600 comments that I found on this video, and it says this from a young man. The terrifying aspect of hell, I feel sometimes, is what tries to keep me on the straight and narrow. I feel shame and guilt for sins I've committed. I'm guilt-ridden all the time, and I can't snap out of it. It's strange how we're told to fear the wrath of God, yet He loves you. What kind of sense is that? And another young man, or another young woman, as she was talking about this newfound freedom from religion that she's found, very succinctly said this. I love this because freedom is everything. You know, I get it. The world we live in today and that the young people have grown up into is characterized by certain views and opinions that are very different from previous generations. In fact, just 50 years ago, what was accepted as social norms are no longer accepted as social norms today. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm open to new opinions, new ideas, and I'm willing to listen to other ideas. I think it's good to question things and to be honest about what we're thinking. But what is different today? If we're being honest, it's all about us as individuals. And see if this resonates with you. It's how I feel. It's what I think that drives my reality, that defines my reality, and it shapes my reality and the reality that I see around me. It causes me to respond in ways that fit what I believe and what I think about things. And as an independent, educated person, I pride myself in shaping my own destiny. Senior pastor at a church in Vancouver, his name is Mark Clark, he puts it this way. He says the philosophy of our time is that the world will get better with progress, technology, and education. We're going to move from the dumb idea of God and religion, and we're going to get smarter. We're going to solve our own problems as a culture, so all we need is education, technology, scientific discovery, progress, etc. etc. So if you're thinking about walking away from Christianity, before you go, let's explore this dumb idea of God. And let's see if we can make some sense out of an all-powerful, ever-living being we call God. As it's written in the book of the prophet Isaiah, "Come now, let us reason together, saith the Lord." Now, I've heard this question asked many times. How can I possibly believe in a God I can't see? Well, let me ask you a question. How can I believe in the presence of atoms? I can't see those. Let's use this as an example. What makes an object visible is the way it displaces light, the way it reflects light. Let me give you an example. If we shut all the lights off in this building and made it pitch dark, you wouldn't be able to see me because there's no light from which my body can deflect. Well, atoms are so much smaller than the wavelength of visible light that the two don't really interact. To put it another way, atoms are invisible to visible light. But they do have observable effects that we can see. Let's take the example of the way electrons move through a copper wire. When there's a force applied to one end, it drives free electrons from atom to atom, moving them forward. This is what carries the charge through the wire. Now, you don't see that. You don't see those atoms. You don't see the movement of those electrons, but touch the end of a live wire and you'll know that they're there. I found that out myself when I was young. I was an electrician apprentice, and the journeyman asked me to climb under this building, a halfway house in Deltona Beach, had about an 18-inch crawl space. And he had disabled a circuit, and I was to remove a junction box under there. I think it was about a 30-amp junction box. So I started cutting wires away and discovered very quickly he hadn't shut it off. It was the 4th of July under that building. There were sparks flying everywhere. My electrician pliers had a hole in them this big. Now, I didn't have to see those electrons to see the effect of them, did I? Well, it's the same thing with God. We don't actually have to see him to see the effect of his creation, to know that he exists through observable things here on this earth. And when I look at the complexity that exists in the world, it's really difficult for me to see that there's not an intelligent creator. Let's take an example of the human body. And I'm only going to touch on this briefly because of the little bit of time that we have, but we know that the body has individual parts that all work in concert together, and the capabilities, the cognitive capabilities of the human being are unmatched by any other being or any other species on this planet. Our nervous system operates in conjunction with our brains, and what that does is that allows us to feel everything from extreme pleasure to a very intense pain. And this is caused by that relationship between the brain and the spinal system. So one might say all of these capabilities in the human body occurred through random chance or natural selection, or what many call macroevolution. But I think if you're willing to think more deeply about this and look at this logically, it lacks logic. Let's take a look at the computer. It's created by human hands. It's been developed over years. It continues to be developed. There's a vast amount of information that can be stored in one. It's produced by the byproduct of a human designer. And improvements in speed and memory and other capabilities have only gotten better and better as time has gone on. However, despite all of its capabilities, the computer pales in comparison to the human brain. I read an article quite some time ago by a science and technology journalist by the name of Ryan Whitwam. And this is what he had to say. We have a picture here that we want to show you of the K computer. At that time, it was about 10 years ago, this was the most powerful, fastest computer in the world. And this is what he is speaking of. He says this: 1 second of human brain activity takes 82,944 processors. And it took 40 minutes with the combined muscle of those 82,944 processors in the K computer to get just 1 second of biological brain processing time. While it was running, the simulation ate up 1,000 terabytes of system memory as each synapse was modeled individually. Now, he concluded that the human mind could not create an object that even matches what the human brain can do. The human brain and the human body combined with all of its capabilities, these are feats that are unfathomable to humans. There's no way we could create artificial brain to be able to do the things that our brains can do. Now, getting back to these comments in the video that I referenced earlier, I want to mention that I did see a common thread. And it wasn't a common thread in so much of what they said as what they didn't say. That common thread to me was that there was a lack of understanding that faith in God is really based on a relationship. It's a relationship with Jesus. Because without this, we strive for something that's totally unreachable. So you might have a question like this, and it's a fair one. How does one have a relationship with someone they can't see? Or what does it mean when we say it's not a religion, it's a relationship? Those are fair questions, let's face it. When you ask many Christians, what does that mean? I think they stumble and struggle sometimes to describe just what that means. And no matter what we mean by it, what is it that others hear when we talk to them about the gospel? Well, there's a woman, Gina Welch, who wrote a book. She had an experience masquerading as a believer at Jerry Falwell's church. And she was bewildered by this terminology, a relationship with Jesus. And I took a couple of excerpts from her book, and this is what she said. You often hear evangelicals use an inscrutable expression to describe their faith. They call it a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. For a literal thinker like me, those words had a corporate speak detachment from content. She goes on to say, I still had a hard time holding on to an understanding of these words. A personal relationship with God, as in you and God stay up late talking, as in you and God are secret shares. Maybe the best way to explain what this phrase is all about is that it's about knowing God. It's about being in deep communion with Him. It's about having a desire for Him. It's being a Christ follower by doing His will. It's personal, yes, but not in an independent way. That's because Christians are saved into a community of faith. You know, Apostle Paul speaks about this all the time, that it's the church body, it's us that are the temple of God. Our faith is to be public, and it's to be in community with other believers. So let's take two ways that we could be confident in our relationship with Jesus. That it is possible for us to have that relationship without actually having seen His face, without actually having sat at His feet, without actually following Him. And the first one is, we have to trust that the Bible is true. Now, why is that? Well, I think to enjoy a relationship with Jesus, we really need to understand that He is the Word. Let's go to 1 John, verse 1 and verse 14. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. We saw Him in His glory. Glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. We're told Jesus is the Word. And if He is the Word, we got to know His Word to know Him. He's revealed Himself to all mankind throughout the ages through His Word. His Word is a roadmap. It's a GPS into knowing who He is, what He has done, what He's doing, and what He will do in the future. Well, you might ask, well, how can I trust the words that are in this book? Well, for me, one surefire way is to know and understand there are over 350 prophecies in the Old Testament that are fulfilled in Jesus the Christ. The first one is in the very first book of the Bible, Genesis. It's in chapter 3. This is where we're told that the Messiah will be born of the seed of a woman, which infers a virgin birth. And the last one in the Old Testament is found in the last book of Malachi, chapter 4. This is where John the Baptist is described as the forerunner of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Now, the odds of only a few of these prophecies being fulfilled in one man are staggering. I don't think there's a number that tells us what the odds are in 315 being fulfilled in just one man. So to be in a relationship with Jesus, first, we have to trust that the Bible is true, that it is His Word. And second, we really have to have faith in who He says He is. Now, there are those who contend that Jesus never said He was God. However, the Jews of Jesus' day understood and believed certainly that that was what He claimed to be. Over and over again, especially in the book of John, he refers to himself as I am. Now that wasn't lost on the Jews. Many of you know the story of the Exodus. If you go to the Exodus in the Old Testament, when God called Moses to lead his people out of bondage, and he asked, "Who should I say sent me?" He said, "Say, I am sent you." See, I am is the covenant name of God, Jehovah, for Israel. Therefore, the great I am is the designation for God. Therefore, Jesus' statement when he says, I am, this is what he's saying. It's a clear indication to the Jews that he's saying, I am God. Now, if you want more than that, more proof than that, go to John chapter 7. It's in verse 28 and 29, we're told this. Then Jesus, still teaching in the temple courts, cried out, "Yes, you know me, and you know where I'm from. I'm not here on my own, but he who sent me is true. You do not know him, but I know him because I'm from him, and he sent me." If you go to John chapter 8 a little further, the Pharisees asked him a question, "Where is your Father?" This is what he said. He said, "You do not know me or my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also." And further on in the same chapter, Jesus says this, "I tell you the truth. Before Abraham was born, I am." And then even more directly in chapter 10, he says, "I and the Father are one." Now, if we don't believe that he is who he says he is, then I contend one would have to believe that he's either a liar, that he's insane, or that this whole story is just a legend. Let's explore those three things real briefly here. Is he a liar? Well, let's talk about the characteristics of a liar, what that looks like. You know, liars usually crack under pressure. From time to time, I watch a show called 48 Hours. It's a documentary, a crime documentary. And if any of you have watched that, you notice pretty quickly that liars crack under pressure. Now, Jesus suffered one of the worst tortures and scourgings a being could take. He died on the cross, which was the worst way to die. Now, would a liar go all the way to the cross? Liars also always have a motive for lying, don't they? Jesus never benefited from his claim to be God. He wasn't looking for power. He wasn't looking for riches. He didn't even have a home with which to lay his head. And you know, liars typically will not champion the cause of the disenfranchised. Jesus stood up continuously for the marginalized throughout his 3 years in his ministry. And of course, liars really aren't typically known to champion moral values, are they? I mean, could Jesus have been the greatest moralist in the world and still be a liar when he emphasized the truth be spoken at all times? No. Was Jesus a liar? Not by these characteristics. Well, okay, well maybe he was a lunatic. Maybe he was crazy. Well, let's explore what that looks like. You know, in the New Testament, the writers in the New Testament, they weren't shy about pointing out that others thought Jesus was crazy, that he was insane. Now, only those with a high confidence in the character of the individual would be willing to admit that there were people that thought he was insane, because it would tarnish someone's reputation. They weren't concerned about that at all. What about this? Would a brother follow a brother if he thought he was insane? If you go into Mark chapter 21, you'll see that James, Jesus' brother, thought Jesus was crazy. He thought he was insane. However, when he saw the resurrected Jesus, he discovered other than that. So would a brother follow an insane brother to death? You know, the insane, they don't speak the way Jesus did. There's no other man in the history of mankind that over 2,000 years ago spoke words into the lives of so many people. And here's the important thing: changed the lives of so many people. So, was he a lunatic? No, I contend he wasn't. Well, what about a legend? I've heard people say that it's just stories, that this is just made up. You know, Jesus has more biographies written about him than any other person in the ancient world. Let's take the Emperor Tiberius. He died in 37 AD, but his first biography was written somewhere around 70 to 80 years later. Look at Alexander the Great, who died in 323 BC. First biography on him wasn't until 450 years later. Jesus had 4 biographies written on him in the very first generation after his crucifixion, which is way too quick for a legend to really corrupt the main message of Jesus' life. Luke, who wrote the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts, wrote it before 62 AD. This was only 29 years before Jesus was crucified. And you know, the Gospels were really deeply concerned about history. And the Bible has an incredible track record because for the last 150 years, archaeology has done nothing but support and confirm that what as we read in the Bible is true and accurate. So is Jesus a legend? I contend he isn't. So, putting this all together, is Jesus a liar? Is he a lunatic? Is he a legend? Or is he Lord? I contend he's Lord. Yes, we must trust that the Bible is true and that Jesus is who he says he is. But see, this is not a blind faith that's required of us. So if you're considering stepping away from the church or away from Christianity, before you go, consider what Paul wrote to the church in Rome. From the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly observed in what he made. As a result, people have no excuse. People, we have no excuse. Now, you may have more questions. You may have comments. You're certainly free to put those in here at the bottom of this message online. But if you'd also like to send in questions or comments privately, you can do so at our email address, info@cornerstone.co. Note that that's not .com, it's .co. info@cornerstone.co. We'll do our best to respond and to answer any questions that you have. But as we break for today, remember the atoms. They're there, but you can't see them. You only see the result of their presence. Thank you for joining us this morning, and may God richly bless you.
Thank you guys for joining us for our online service. We hope to see you soon. Check out cornerstonedeltona.com. Get connected. We'd love to see you in one of our small groups as well as all the upcoming events. God bless.